This year will mark 10 years since the Owen Sound Attack won the OHL championship. Relive every save, every goal, every hit from that 7-game series between the Attack and the Mississauga St. Michael's Majors. Rogers TV will broadcast all 7 games of the 2011 OHL final from May 9th to the 15th.
Your mouth can do a lot of amazing things. And your mouth can save a life.
Hi, I'm Tom Wong. I'm just one of close to 1,000 Canadians in search of a stem cell match. We need your help.
A simple swab is all you need to register on the National Stem Cell Database. You could be the one to save a life. Find the hero in you.
This is Rogers TV, Grey County.
Hello and welcome to the Rogers TV COVID show. I'm Carol Merton, and I would like to share some thoughts with you before I welcome our guests to the program. We are at a critical juncture in our ability to contain the spread of COVID-19 and protect our residents. Our hospitals in Grey Bruce are admitting very sick COVID-19 patients to the ICU beds, and our healthcare system in Ontario is being stretched to its limits. Hospital beds and ventilators are not an endless supply, and no one wants to think about what might happen should all of those beds and the ventilators be in use and more very sick patients arrive and need this specialized care. Our Grey Bruce Public Health Unit is the leading agency for the management of the COVID-19 emergency, but they can't do this alone. They need, and in fact are pleading with us, to work together with them. We can all agree that we want to make this lockdown the very last one we will have to go through. Follow the provincial stay-at-home order by not going out except for absolutely essential travel. If you have any possible COVID-19 symptoms, go to the assessment clinics for testing. Be open and transparent about the people that you have been in contact with. This might actually save their life and those of others. The Grey Bruce Health Unit asks the public to continue to practice the 3 W's. Watch your distance, wear a mask, wash your hands. This journey has been a long and very weary, tiring time for all of us. The sacrifices we continue to make each and every day will bring us all closer to the finish line. Let's make a difference together. Thank you to our community and all who are working so hard to bring an end to this pandemic. And on that note, I also want to say thank you to my guest who's joining me today. I am delighted to have you on the show. This is Nicole McKnight, and this topic is absolutely fascinating. Nicole is from Finder Canada, and she's here to talk about the impact of COVID-19 on relationships, marriages, and just what's happening as a result. And we think of COVID in many different ways and the impacts, but I was absolutely fascinated to review your information. So welcome and thank you. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about yourself and your organization.
Yes, thank you so much, Carol, for having me on. It's a pleasure. So I am the communications lead for Finder Canada. We are a global comparison site, and we compare everything from credit cards, home loans, to pretty much anything you can imagine in the financial realm, just helping Canadians make better decisions in those areas.
Excellent. So what made the target of COVID-19 and Canadian couples, how did that even come onto the subject line that you're studying?
Yeah, well, I think, at Finder, we want to stay on top of all of the relevant trends, and what COVID has done has given us so many really odd behavioral trends that wouldn't have happened otherwise. So, and ultimately those behavioral trends and massive changes in society have a really direct correlation to Canadians' finances and their futures.
And I must say that connection, it's interesting because you don't automatically put relationships and finances. I mean, I know it's part of it, but just how you've been looking at it is quite interesting. So tell me what you're learning as you're evaluating this.
Yeah, so what we found was Canadians are clearly experiencing quite a lot of romantic breakups this past year. In fact, nearly 5 million Canadians said that they had, in the last year since the beginning of the pandemic, experienced either a separation, a divorce, or a romantic breakup of some sort. And really, age was the biggest factor, and that was something that was really enlightening to us when we looked at this study.
So it isn't just marriages, it's relationships across the board. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, so just to kind of paint that picture a little bit better. So age, being those 18 to 24-year-olds that they had the highest rate of breakups. So, most of them aren't likely to be married. So it was more about romantic breakups for them. And you can imagine with post-secondary school being canceled, their social lives kind of falling apart, the romantic lives would follow. And then the next age group that had more marital breakdowns was Canadians aged 35 to 44. So they had the highest rates of separation or divorce, 5% each, saying that either separated or divorced in the age group. And, again, it would be speculation, but you can imagine that age group was most likely to have young children at home. So you've got the stressors of working from home, no childcare in many cases with all the school shutdowns and, putting a lot of strain, I think, on the relationship.
And, we don't realize sometimes we hear, absence makes the heart grow fonder. Well, getting out of the house may make the heart grow fonder as well. Yeah. In this instance. And that sometimes we need to have that both inside home and outside home for stronger relationships.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point that you bring up, and it leads me to talk about, we also asked about quarantine quirks. So what was bothering people about their partner, and to your point, when you're kind of around each other 24/7, those little things that maybe don't matter in normal times all of a sudden start to matter. So what we found interesting there was that men actually were twice as likely to be annoyed across the board with their partners. And for the most part, they were annoyed with things like their partner wearing sweatpants all the time, or maybe that loungewear trend gone overboard, or their female partners doing too much online shopping, what was more of a concern for men. So overall, we found that men seem to be a little bit more annoyed with those quirks, but then when we looked at big picture stressors, it was women that were far more stressed out about sort of, I guess, more real world things like finances or, the rising COVID cases, all of that sort of those stressors.
So this wasn't something you could almost anticipate, this change.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Stats Can actually stopped tracking divorces about 10 or 12 years ago. So it's kind of difficult. You can't really compare apples to apples, but we did actually do calls with lawyers and mediators to confirm that they were seeing the same. And they all said that they were seeing 2 to 3 times the number of phone calls coming in the past year, regardless of time of year, just far more than pre-pandemic. And they were almost too busy to handle all of these phone calls and new clients.
Wow. So you mentioned you'd made some calls, but do you do surveys? How else do you gather your information?
Yeah, so basically we did the survey. We went out to about 1,200 Canadians, which is a representative sample across Canada, making sure that we have enough people from various age groups, provinces, et cetera. And then we kind of extrapolate that data. And that's what we do on a sort of a regular basis when we're looking at trends.
So this is a process that you will continue as we move through the pandemic. It doesn't stop just with this bit of information then.
No, we're looking at all kinds of trends. You can imagine with divorce and separation, if Canadians are finding themselves suddenly single, we put together some tips for them about, making sure that they're not panicking or making impulsive decisions, because while your life may be changing and you may have been a little bit prepared or maybe not so prepared for that to happen, the decisions that you're making in a time of stress can affect your financial life well into the future. So basically telling Canadians to just take their time, do their research, enlist the experts, whether it's a financial advisor, a real estate agent. If you're amicable with your ex-partner, there's an opportunity to do mediation together and save thousands and thousands of dollars on lawyers' fees. And often that's usually best, especially if there's children involved and all of those things to consider.
So I'd like to drill down a little bit more into the statistics because they're actually very enlightening. There's a change in geography as well around the rates of, and if you wouldn't mind speaking about the differences. And my question was why? Why the differences, whether you live in one province or the other? So maybe you can talk a bit about that.
Sure. So with Quebec had the highest rates of breakups in all of Canada. So almost a quarter of Quebecers had that they'd experienced a romantic breakup, which is really massive. Followed closely by Nova Scotia at 21%, BC 17%, Alberta 15%, and then Manitoba and Ontario actually came in a little bit lower than the average at 11% each. And to be honest, it's difficult to find a direct correlation in terms of why. We get these numbers, and then we asked about things like stressors and quarantine quirks, and we found that the best that we can do is say that, in Quebec or those provinces where the rates were much higher, they also said that they, had a higher percent of their population was more bothered by their partner's quarantine quirks or more stressed out about certain things. So you can kind of draw conclusions in that way. But regardless, it's a problem that's been affecting all of Canada really this last year.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned, you think relationships are strengthened when people are together. It's always, gee, I can hardly wait for the weekend. I can spend time together. Mm-hmm. But you're saying 13%, both sexes report being equally irritated about spending too much time together.
Yeah, I think, again, it's especially if you think about it, imagine a couple that, both works from home. Maybe they have young children and their children are also at home. It can be very overwhelming. You're trying to move to different areas of the house and hide and take a meeting, and you've got a crying child in the background. I mean, just kind of painting a picture of what that might look like. And of course, this could happen to couples of all ages, but I think, that's particularly stressful when you're used to maybe dropping your child off at school, retreating to the sanctuary of your office, or even having plans with family or friends on the weekend, and all of that basically stripped away.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, the life as you know it is so different, and your relationships obviously feel that as well. You mentioned the term suddenly single. Mm-hmm. I found that interesting because sometimes, it's a process, right? But it's been going on for a year, and it's not, it's hard to see the end in sight right now when we're in this third lockdown.
Yes.
Yeah,
and I think, even, I can't speak to this directly, but speaking to the experts in that field, lawyers and mediators, one of them actually put it really nicely and said that, if your relationship was very strong leading into the pandemic, you're likely to maybe weather the storm. But if there were sort of pre-existing issues kind of under the surface, sort of now is the time when it was going to come to a head, essentially. So, these may have been couples that, may not have lasted for the long term, but it sort of sped up that process in many cases, is what they said.
Right. So you may have mentioned this earlier, but I'd like to elaborate. The finders, the tips for the suddenly single, that you had some sections. The first was sell or stay. And we know right now, the real estate market has changed as well. So right. What do you tell people around that sell or stay?
Yes. So I think it really depends on your situation. If you're in a situation where, you can afford to stay in the family home on going from 2 incomes to 1 income, that might be a priority for you. And I think in that case, it's about, make a budget, make sure that you're not stretching yourself too thin in order to do that. So kind of manage your expectations. You may have to be a renter for a little while, but to your point about the real estate market, it may not be so bad to be a seller right now with the way things are going. And, it might allow you to put a little bit less pressure on yourself to maybe just rent for a little while, figure out your next steps before making, really big decisions with real estate when prices are, very, very, very high at this point.
You mentioned as well about the 2 to 1 incomes, that financial stress. We talk about working from home, but for some, that's not a possibility. I'm thinking that would feed into these statistics as well.
Yeah, I guess it really could go either way. You've got the couples that are both working from home and feeling that stress of just the constant time together. But yeah, if you've got essential workers that are having to be out of the home, or maybe even having to take time off work and all of the challenges that come with that. There's just so much to consider. And I think what you're saying, it really speaks to the fact that we're still sort of in this. Unfortunately, there are people that are still struggling with their businesses and their work prospects. So yeah, I think all things considered, just, try to imagine what your future post-COVID life will be, and, create a budget for that, live within your means, and just look for, I guess, exciting elements of what your new life might look like. It's good to, get excited about the future, even though it's maybe a little difficult right now.
Yeah. So the second section you talked about around tips for suddenly single was go it solo. And you talked about finding a roommate too. So, maybe you can elaborate a bit.
I think with that, it's just about looking at all different walks of life. The very wealthy can get separated or divorced, as can people that have lower incomes. So if you're someone where, income is a concern for you, it's basically about opening yourself to other possibilities. Perhaps it is about, getting a roommate to lessen that financial burden, even moving back in with family for a time. There's quite a few options. It's just, I think the most important thing is to not make hasty decisions. You don't want to quickly sell your home in a rush when you're in a, maybe a negative emotional state. You give yourself time to get to a better place emotionally, and then sort of make those big financial decisions that will impact your life for of course, for years to come.
You certainly raised the point, you've got to also be careful if you decide to pick a roommate. There's a health-related risk, and you might end up in quarantine you weren't expecting.
Yes, definitely. So, of course, we all want to be safe and follow the rules in terms of lockdown. So again, that's where I think at this point anyways, it makes sense to just take your time before you jump into a new arrangement. While we're still facing the pandemic, ideally you can take a little bit of time to sort out all of these financial matters and new living arrangements, when things get a little bit safer and open up.
So you talk about coordinating a cash out, and that's relating to investments. We've talked about housing. Yes. And what would you say to people who might wonder about whether they should invest, liquidate, what they should do?
Sure. So I think sometimes people, when you're faced with a big change in your life, you might make the assumption that, especially with a marriage, that, it's 50-50 and, we've got to split everything. So let's quickly sell things like stocks or other types of investments, when maybe in fact you can work with your, ex-partner on, hey, I don't want to liquidate these stocks because they may be worth far more in the future. And you can look to, perhaps if you sell your home, you can adjust accordingly and pay out your partner a little bit more that way. Or, some people may have concerns around their pension and wanting to kind of hold on to that, it being very important to their future. So yeah, basically, again, I know I keep saying it, but it all goes back to sort of taking time, trying your best to be collaborative, and enlist the help of experts. If you're not somebody who's financially savvy, talk to a financial advisor, talk to an accountant, all of these people that can help you make decisions that are not just good for right now, but for your future.
So we've mentioned briefly about kids, that they can be a stressor, but having a relationship breakdown is stressful on the kids.
Yes.
And I'm sure you've evaluated that as well. So for couples who have kids.
Yeah, I think again, it comes down to, this can go back to something like, selling the family home or not. I think you have to think about, where your child's school is. Do you want to keep their life a little bit more consistent? They're going to regardless face some inconsistency in their life or a change in their schedule, a change in their lifestyle, but perhaps it's about working together to try to limit that. And again, I think just the more amicable you can be, working, with the mediator that we spoke to, they said they work collaboratively with couples to come up with, if you have a young child, a certain schedule might be better than if you have a teenager and all of that. So basically lessening any sort of negative impact on the children and keeping them first in all of your decisions.
So needless to say, throughout this conversation, there's many resources for people to access, and you're encouraging people to use those resources, because having a relationship breakdown in the middle of a pandemic, when you are at a stay-at-home order, and your finances may be challenged. Really, can it get much more?
Yeah,
that's a lot.
It's a lot at once. Yes, that's for sure. So, and clearly, it's when you've got nearly 5 million Canadians talking about this, and a little fewer probably for marriage and divorce, which is a little bit more involved. Even still, that's quite a lot of Canadians that are facing this stress, and it's not something that might be widely talked about, except anecdotally when you might know a friend or a family member going through this. So basically seek out support. And I think on that emotional side as well, look to, phone or, video therapy, and take care of your emotional self as best as you can during this pandemic. And then I think the rest will follow once you kind of prioritize self-care and emotional care as well.
So you mentioned earlier quarantine quirks, which is quite a catchy phrase.
Yeah.
And then, in the information you provided, it talks about cabin fever. Yeah. So I'm wondering if there's more you'd like to add in those sections.
Yeah, I think, what we found when we asked Canadians what, about those quirks, about the stresses that they were facing, cabin fever came out on top. We had about 4 in 10 Canadians saying they were really, really struggling with this, especially older Canadians. They were the highest, the seniors were the ones really struggling the most with cabin fever, perhaps not visiting family for so long and really, really struggling with those feelings of loneliness. And, right after that, it was rising COVID cases, which I think we're all, looking at right now. And it's very stressful a year in to still be worrying about those things, but also finances, nearly 4 in 10. So those were the 3 things: cabin fever, COVID cases, and then finances, probably because of the things we're talking about, whether they're facing a relationship breakdown or even just people that are facing job insecurity. So yeah, Canadians are in a state of some very, very strong stresses right now.
Big time.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting to me, just the relationship with the men and women and the percentages.
Yeah.
The fear of the COVID, you mentioned it's more women than men.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of, 36% of men are concerned about that. That's still significant.
Oh, for sure. And I think we just noticed that women in general tended to be a little bit more stressed about these issues than men, but it doesn't mean that men aren't either. So yeah, it really, it was interesting to see. I think with the quirks, the funny little aspects were, men being far more concerned about online spending or how their partners were dressing or that sort of thing. But when it came to the big issues, again, I think it's something that's facing all Canadians right now. Just, the serious issues of being in lockdown and how that feels, and the fears and all of that's going around for sure.
Interesting. What surprises came for you? The sweatpants is a real surprise for me.
It does paint men in a little bit more of a superficial brush, I guess, than it does women. So yeah, I think that was probably a surprise to see that those gender differences with the quirks. But I think really the biggest surprise for us was just seeing and then having experts confirm that especially those Canadians aged 35 to 44 having 2 to 3 times the rate of separation and divorce. It's a pretty astounding trend when you think about deviating from the norm in that way. So really realizing that so many Canadians are going to be facing, in the midst of a pandemic, all of really big financial decisions in their lives, whether it's buying or selling a home, and all their financial future they're having to reevaluate during a pandemic, which was pretty astounding to us.
It's amazing to me. I just can't even imagine how stressful that would be. So we've got a few more minutes left in the program. What haven't I asked you? What haven't we chatted about?
I think, again, I think we've gone through most of the statistics, but it's about those tips. I just want to reiterate that people, it's important when you're facing a big change in your life. I know it's difficult, but in those moments of challenging times, it's about not panicking and really evaluating your options. And at Finder, we're all about educating Canadians to help them make good life choices. So go to finder.com, look for more information. This particular report is under divorce statistics, and we've got a lot of resources linked there that you can find in terms of experts. But yeah, just go to finder.com and other places to educate yourselves and enlist those experts in your life to really help you move forward in a healthy way.
Yeah, and that's important to know that there are other resources. Before I received this information, I did not know of your organization. I didn't, but now I do. Yeah.
Sure. Yes, there's so much information, so it's important to educate.
Who funds the studies that you're doing? How does that happen?
We do it ourselves just to get a better sense of what's happening with Canadians and trends, and being able to kind of point them to the correct resources on our site, and just have our fingers on the pulse of what's happening is a really useful thing for us, and to ensure that we're putting out the right content for Canadians based on what they're facing.
And so it's available across Canada?
Yeah, you just go to finder.com and it will bring you to our website, and you'll be able to find all kinds of information on there about how to have a better financial future for yourself.
I know no one has a crystal ball, but what do you think if we were talking in a year from now, you and I? And that's an open invitation.
Yeah,
what would you predict around this
particular issue? Yeah, we do plan to revisit it in about a year's time. I think it's a good question that you've asked, because in Canada, the vast majority of divorces, you need to wait a year for them to go through. So many of the people that we asked that said they had just experienced a separation, I would imagine that in about a year's time, the divorce rate will be even higher, because all of those sort of divorces will start to come through and be finalized. So we do plan to follow up on it. So I do think that we're still sort of in the thick of this particular trend, and we probably won't see the end of it for, at least a year.
So certainly from a financial perspective, from a health perspective, but also from a relationship perspective, COVID has had a huge impact on Canadian society, really.
Yes.
Yeah. And things we probably could never have predicted, for sure. Yeah, interesting. Well, I wish you all the best as you move forward with your studies, and certainly, it'll be interesting to see what happens as your research moves forward. I also appreciate your advice to people to just, don't be in a rush. Take your time. Think about this. It's hard sometimes when you're in that kind of a stressor but that's excellent. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Carol.
Thank you to our viewing audience as well for joining us here on the COVID-19 show. Please join us again to learn more about resources and services available to you and to your family. Take care, stay safe, and take care of each other. Thank you.